Director Sean S. Cunningham brings us Deep Star 6, a 1989 creature feature. Now, Deep Star 6 was the first in a short-lived kind of fad of underwater sea monster movies that spanned the kind of the late 80s to the early 90s. And Deep Star 6 has a couple of recognisable character actors in Miguel Ferrer and Matt McCoy, among others, of course, and tells a story of this kind of underwater station which is kind of developing missiles or positioning missiles underwater and things like this, as well as kind of doing geographical studies and things like this. So we meet this kind of motley crew of staff under there, and they are working, and they basically kind of end up disturbing this ancient sea creature that has been kind of lying dormant under a kind of basically a cavern. And this creature now takes umbrage to these humans coming into its territory and decides to attack. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. Now, I am a sucker for a sea monster movie. Shark movies I love, but I also love sea monster movies. So I was a big fan of this kind of little craze when it kind of happened and all the time afterwards. So Deep Star 6 is notable for having a kind of a large kind of practically realised kind of creature that is like some type of giant arthropod, and it looks pretty impressive. It's obviously something that's been physically built. This is obviously before the days of CGI, really. So it's quite an impressive kind of crab-like looking sort of creature that looks very alien. And on the subject of Alien, if you're a fan of the movie Alien, this movie does feel very, very similar in some ways. You know, a kind of crew of working class kind of protagonists in a kind of confined area with some type of invasive species that is hungry for human flesh loose in these confined walls. So yes, the comparisons with the Alien movie are fair, I would say. But this set does look pretty good, and you do get the sense that there's only so many places you can kind of possibly run. And, you know, a lot of this movie feels a lot like a disaster movie. And we're going to touch on that in the negatives, but I do think it shows like a degree of, problem solving that our characters have to kind of come across. There's a variety of problems, a lot of them caused by this creature, but they don't know this through a lot of the movie. Our kind of cast of characters have to kind of come over. So it's finding solutions for the variety of problems that these people face. So it's very much a story about human kind of trying to overcome the odds and using what is just nearby to kind of make do, basically. So you could say there's more than one way to kind of get out of a problem. You're gonna have to just sometimes you've got jimmy a solution, so to speak. So I kind of quite like the kind of the way that these problems keep sort of one after another keep kind of rearing their head, and how our dwindling cast of characters have to try and deal with each of these issues. And some of the kind of the deaths here, they do feel a little painful, I must say. I think the standout for me is a character who tries to go to the surface without getting going through the kind of the decompression process, and it's certainly one of the most kind of like memorable deaths in the movie, I would say, and I think probably the one that would stick out after this film is finished, I would argue. Arguably nothing to do with the creature as well, I would say. But the creature, as I say, looks pretty good. It's well realised. It looks kind of big. It looks about the size of like a killer whale. And it poses a real problem for our characters, because they just don't really know what to do with it, and they're not really prepared for having kind of close combat and stuff like that. So it presents quite the problem. I think the acting is solid. Everyone here does a decent enough job. Some of the characters are a little on the weak side, I would say, But, you know, I don't think the acting is bad at all from the cast here. So let's talk about what doesn't work. As I've kind of mentioned, the characters, some of them at least, I feel are a little bit thinly sketched. In particular, our kind of main couple, who are the de facto good guys. And, you know, as sometimes is the problem when you have our altruistic kind of protagonists, they're very much the most dull characters in the movie. Our kind of duplicitous character, played by M.A.L is the sort of one who is sort of a coward. He sticks out because he has a little bit more going on. And even though he's portrayed as a sort of a coward, he, you know, you can kind of understand to a large degree, and he kind of messes up. But you sort of understand, considering the circumstances. But our main protagonists really are blank slates. They really have no defining character traits at all, to be honest with you. And it's true of some of the other characters to a lesser degree, but because we spend most of the time with these two as our main protagonists, they are the most, you know, generic sorts of good guy character stereotypes you can possibly imagine. And the other thing about the way this movie is written, it has to be said that some of the actions that our characters do in this movie are, you know, of their own making. Let's just say that. I mean, there's more than one occasion where problems are caused by our characters not acting professionally, not having oversight, being rash, to the point where it's a little ridiculous, I have to say. Considering these are meant to be, I mean, you'd have to be fairly sort of go through some rigorous training or be super qualified to spend extended amounts of time, you know, in a multi-million-dollar research station under the ocean for, you know, months at a time. Yet the characters seem to make poor or rash decisions or unthinking kind of moves with alarming regularity, it must be said. So it kind of like, I think some of the situations that our characters faced, you know, it kind of feels like manufactured drama, to be honest with you. And on the subject of that as well, let me transition to the actual kind of the content of the movie. This is really, you know, when you're watching this as a creature feature, but 2/3 of it is more like a disaster film, with the creature really only coming into play in the last act of the movie. Now, the creature is around, and sometimes it's causing these problems, but we don't see it, and the characters don't know about it. And as such, you know, it's just one disaster after another that these characters have to kind of like end up dealing with. So the movie plays a little bit more like the Poseidon adventure, more so than a creature feature, until we get to the kind of the last act of the movie. So arguably you could say the movie is a little misrepresented in regards to being called a creature feature, when most of the threat actually comes from more of a disaster film type scenario. In actual fact, more of the characters probably die as a result of stuff like that. So the creature, when it does appear in the kind of the third act, as I say, it looks effective. But I don't know, as we are led to believe, what this creature has achieved in regards to, you know, destroying equipment, biting through things like metal stuff. The creature isn't that big, really. I mean, it's big. It's probably the size of like a great white or something like that, you know. But it's kind of like crab-like. But it's not huge. It's not like a kaiju-side thing. And yet, you know, and it's not like a creature that is aerodynamic in regards to like swimming ability, but somehow we're led to believe it's swimming at an incredible rate. Not that we ever see it; it's all we're just told on the radar and stuff like that. Or it's destroying, you know, various kind of like metal implements and things. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't know if the creature, it looks like it'd be that powerful, to be honest with you. And then we have the finale, where it has a surprise pop-up, and I'm thinking, well, how has it got there? You know, how has it got there? That's all I'll say, if you haven't seen the film. So I think the creature, you know, in a vacuum, I think it looks pretty impressive. But the practical side of stuff, when you stop to think about it, I'm not really sure it would do as much damage as this movie kind of says it does, if that makes sense. It doesn't really seem like it would be to be able to cause this much chaos, if we're being honest, you know. It's kind of like if you were to have a like a lion or a tiger in something like this, you know, you're sure it would definitely be a problem and it would probably kill people, but I just don't know if it would cause this amount of damage. So yeah, you know, maybe it's a little on the kind of the sillier side, to be honest. And you know, as it stands, it's very much a taking a leaf out of the Alien playbook. So it's not exactly what you would call an original story. So all that being said, you know, it's certainly a watchable film. I think you can enjoy the kind of the set design and the kind of the creature when it does eventually kind of show up. In my opinion, a little bit too late, I have to say. But it's, you know, it has its flaws, and I don't think it's the strongest out of the kind of the underwater creature movies that we got in this kind of era. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. It's, you know, it's a pretty decent watch if you like creature features. What were your thoughts? Please do leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.